First of all, let me say thank you very much for those kind words. Gracias por sus amables palabras. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado. Quisiera saludar a todos ustedes, los que están escuchando esta presentación en sus países. Gracias por su atención también. I'm really honored to address the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, Chairman of the Permanent Council, Dean of the University of San Martin de Torres, and Ambassador Borrell for the kind invitation to inaugurate this lecture series of the Americas. I have long been interested in this organization. 30 years ago, as governor of the state of Georgia, I invited the OAS General Assembly to meet in Atlanta, the first meeting in the United States outside of Washington. And later, as president, I attended and addressed every General Assembly meeting in Washington. Back then, I realized that most of this hemisphere was ruled by military regimes or personal dictatorships. Senate hearings had been held here in Washington that indicated and confirmed that U.S. was involved in destabilizing the government of Salvador Allende in Chile. And a dirty war was being conducted in Argentina. I decided to stop embracing dictators and to make the protection of human rights a cornerstone of the United States of American foreign policy. Not only in this hemisphere, but with all nations. Every American ambassador in the world was instructed by me to be a personal representative to enhance human rights and to provide a haven for those who were persecuted by their own governments. Later, when we signed the Panama Canal Treaty in the same august hall in 1977, many of the non-elected or military leaders were on the dais. Some Caribbean states were absent, not yet part of the Indo-American system. Then in 1979, Ecuador started a pattern of returning governments to civilian rule. The Inter-American Convention on Human Rights soon came into force, and our hemisphere developed one of the strongest human rights standards in the world. These commitments to human rights have brought tremendous progress to Latin America and the Caribbean. Citizens have become involved in every aspect of government. More women are running for public office and being appointed to high positions. Indigenous groups are forming social movements and political parties. Civic organizations are demanding transparency and accountability from their own government. Freedom of expression is flourishing in an independent and vibrant press. Ombudsmen and human rights defenders are active, and many countries are approving and implementing legislation to guarantee that citizens have access to information. The English-speaking Caribbean has sustained vibrant democracies. A democratic Chile is removing military prerogatives from the Pinochet-era constitution, and the military has acknowledged its institutional responsibility for the torture and disappearances of the 1970s. Central America has ended its civil wars, and democracy has survived. The Guatemalan government offered public apology for the murder of Myrna Black, and the Salvadoran responsible for the assassination of Archbishop Romero was tried and convicted last year, although in absentia. Venezuelans have avoided civil violence while enduring a deep political rift in the last 3 years. Mexico developed an electoral institution that has become the envy of the world. Argentine democracy weathered the deepest financial crisis since the 1920s depression, and its economy is on the rebound. 4 years ago, Canada and Peru took the lead in developing a new, more explicit commitment to democracy for the hemisphere. On the tragic day of September 11th, 2001, the Inter-American Democratic Charter was signed. I am proud to have witnessed these demonstrations of the courage, persistence, and creativity of the people of this hemisphere. But I am also worried. I am concerned that the lofty ideas espoused in the Democratic Charter are not all being honored. I'm concerned that poverty and inequality continue unabated. And I'm concerned that we in this room, representing governments and in some cases privileged societies, are not demonstrating the political will to shore up our fragile democracies, protect and defend our human rights system, and tackle the problems of desperation and destitution. Since our years in the White House, my wife Rosa and I have striven to promote peace, freedom, health, and human rights, especially in this hemisphere and in Africa. Our dedicated staff at the Carter Center have worked in 54 elections, the last one in Palestine just 2 years ago, to ensure that they are honest and competitive. Civil strife has become rare in this hemisphere, and every country but Cuba has had at least one truly competitive national election. Yet tiny Guyana, where we at the Carter Center have been involved for now 12 years, remains racked with racial tension and political stalemate. There's a winner-take-all concept of governing that exists, both here in Guyana and in other countries. Haiti, where we monitored the first free election in its history, and where the world contributed many tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, of dollars in aid, has been unable to escape the tragedy of violence and extreme poverty. In Nicaragua, I was privileged to witness and even to help orchestrate the statesmanship of Daniel Ortega as he transferred power to Violeta Chamorro in the middle of the night. Yet today that country continues immersed in political deadlock and poverty that is second only to Haiti. Across the hemisphere, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and Latin Barometer, the polls reveal that many citizens are dissatisfied with the performance of their elected government. They still believe in the promise and principle of democracy, but they do not believe that their government has delivered the promised improvements in living standards, freedom from corruption, and equal access to justice. We run the very real risk that dissatisfaction with the performance of elected government will transform itself into disillusionment with democracy itself. How can we protect the advances made and avoid the dangerous conclusion that democracy may not be worthwhile after all? The greatest challenge of our time is a growing gap between the rich and the poor, both within countries and between the rich north and the poor south. About 45%, 225 million people of Latin America and the Caribbean live under the poverty line. And the mathematical coefficient that measures income inequality reveals that Latin America has the most unequal income distribution of any region in the world. And the income gap has continued to increase in the past 15 years. When people live in grinding poverty, see no hope of improvement for their own children, and are not receiving the rights and benefits of citizenship, they will eventually make their grievances known, and it may be in radical and destructive ways. Government and the privileged in each country must make the decision and demonstrate the will to include all citizens in the benefits of society. Democratic elections have improved, but we have also witnessed a dangerous pattern of ruling parties naming election authorities that are partisan and biased. Governments misusing state funds for campaigning and election results that are not trusted by the populace. I include my own country in saying that we all need to create fair election procedures to regulate campaign finance and to ensure that every eligible citizen is properly registered to vote and has the opportunity to cast their votes that will be counted honestly. But democracy is much more than just elections. It is accountable government. It's the end of impunity for the powerful. It is giving judiciaries independence from political pressure so they can dispense justice with impartiality. It's protecting the rights of minorities, including those who do not vote for the majority party. It is protecting the vulnerable, such as those afflicted with HIV/AIDS, street children, those with mental illnesses, women abused with domestic violence, migrants, and indigenous peoples. Governments of this hemisphere have carried out enormous economic reform in the last 2 decades, but these efforts have not yet brought the needed reduction in poverty and inequality. Too many governments still rely on regressive sales taxes because the privileged classes can manipulate government and avoid paying taxes on their incomes or their wealth. I notice the applause was not quite as great for that. Military spending has been significantly reduced in this hemisphere, but additional reductions are certainly available now that the region is democratic and most border issues have been resolved. Health and education are much more important than expensive weapons systems. Access to land, small loans, and easier permits for small businesses can harness the potential dynamism of each nation's economy. Brazil, poverty, and Venezuela is using oil wealth to bring adult education, literacy, health, and dental services directly to the poor. These and other creative social programs should be studied to see which might be appropriate in other areas. When political leaders do make the right choices to address the needs of their citizens, those citizens have a responsibility as well to comply with the established rules of the political process. Political honeymoons are short, I know from experience, and sometimes the frustrated people are tempted to unseat an unsatisfactory government by violent or unconstitutional means. We've seen that happen in our hemisphere recently, too many times. Elected leaders deserve a chance to make the tough decisions or to be removed at the ballot box. News media play an important, especially important role in a free society. Press freedom is vibrant in this hemisphere and must be kept that way. Insult or defecato laws and harassment of journalists should be eliminated. The media also have a responsibility to investigate carefully and to corroborate their stories before publication. Those of us in the richer nations have additional obligations.